Hello, I'm Nick Varey. Welcome back to video 3 of 3. And by now, hopefully you've noticed that I like me a funky shirt. In this lesson, we're going to cover things like dynamics, articulations. We're going to be diving into how you can approach solos. We're going to be talking about home recording and a little bit about my life as a session musician. So let's talk about dynamics. What are dynamics? In music, it's from going very soft to very loud. This is called piano or forte. I could take one note and I could play very softly. Or I could play very hard. The good thing is to sit down for a while and just play through the dynamics, slowly increasing this. Let's take the A minor pentatonic scale that we did in the last video and go through up and down, adding different dynamics. Let's start small. And then big. Now let's try groups of 3 notes. With different dynamics. We'll start soft, loud, soft, loud, soft, loud, soft, loud. You can try 2 notes as well. Soft, loud, soft, loud, soft, loud, soft, loud, soft, loud. You can do it with strumming as well. When you're trying to control dynamics in strumming, watch out for 2 things in particular. One is the elbow, and the other is how tight you're gripping the pick. If both are really tight, you get this sound. It's very aggressive and it's very in your face. Just by loosening the pick, it sounds a lot more brushy, as I like to call it. It's a much better place to start building from a softer dynamic when you're strumming. Soft. Just keep it soft. Start to build. Back to soft. Dynamics are a great way to create more movement in the piece that you're playing. If everything's on one level, it doesn't feel like we've been on much of a journey, and that's what you want to create for the listener. We'll be applying this stuff back to satisfaction shortly. So now you have a few things under your fingers and we've got an idea of dynamics. Let's talk about the articulations that you can achieve on the guitar. The articulations that you can achieve on stringed instruments make them really unique. Let's start off with something called a hammer-on. I'm going to play the 5th fret on the A string, which is the note of D. Now, before we were picking every note, now if you want something a little bit smoother, you can give it 1 pick, and then with the ring finger, we're going to hammer on to the 7th fret. You need a bit of force behind that. It sounds like this. So this is just a slightly smoother sound then. We could also go descending. This is called a pull-off. If you're reading a tab, you'll see this written as P. In this case, it would be 7, P, 5. And this is when we pick a note and we pull off to the finger behind it. A few things to note about a pull-off. You want the finger behind it to be nice and firm. If it's not firm enough, you're going to get this. There's not going to be any sound because it's muted. You want to have both fingers pushing down and make sure that's nice and firm. Let's hear the 2 combined. A hammer-on and then a pull-off. Another note regarding pull-offs. The word off can be a little bit misleading. It's better to actually pull more downwards rather than off. You get a little bit more attack when you pull down. Now, If your fingers are too curved like this, you're going to get this. And you may find that you play the strings. So you want to flatten whichever finger you're pulling off to, so that these strings are muted. Then you get this. A lot cleaner. Next, let's talk about slides. On a tab, you'll see this notated with a slash. Now, if I take the same two frets and I see 5/7, this means that we're going to slide, and it sounds like this. You can do this with any finger. I'm just going to use my index finger for now. So what about if I do a hammer, a pull, and then a slide? When you're sliding, be careful not to take the finger off as you move through the frets like this. Just slide through, keep the pressure intact. If you're pushing too hard, you may actually bend the string, and you're going to feel like you're really dragging it through the string. So it's about finding that happy medium. Take your time, experiment. There should be enough pressure to move through the frets, but not enough to feel like you're dragging. The next articulation we can talk about is bending. Bending is such an iconic part of the guitar, and it's where the guitar face comes from. You have to really put a lot of stress into this. I'm going to do this on a higher string, a thinner string, because they are somewhat easier to bend. And let's take the 7th fret of the G string. This note is a D. I can bend it downwards or upwards. There's no general rule whether you should bend up or down, but what I would say is, if you're on the high 2 strings, the B and the E, I would avoid bending downwards because you're going to go off the fretboard. Okay? These ones you want to bend upwards. As a general rule, what I like to do is bend upwards on the E, the B and the G, and I bend downwards on the D, the A and the E. Watch out that we don't bend from the bottom of the fingers like this. That can actually cause a bit of trouble. You want to get the fingers nice and bent themselves, and then twist from the wrist. Finally, let the other fingers help out. If you do it with one finger, it can cause a lot of pressure on that finger. I actually like to use all 3, sometimes 2, but I'm pushing mainly with this front finger, in this case my ring finger or 3rd finger, and then I'm helping it with the fingers behind. Let's talk about vibrato. As the word suggests, it's the vibration of the string. And to me, this is where your voice truly comes out on the guitar. This is what it sounds like. There's no right or wrong, it's your voice after all. You could do a very soft vibrato. You could do a very wide vibrato. You could do very slow. You could do very fast. I like to mimic a singer, which is straight, and then often we add vibrato at the end of the notes. Think about vibrato as the note being 0.0. Then choose a direction in which you want to apply your vibrato, either downwards and back to 0.0. It's subtle. Don't try and put in loads of vibrato into one small space like this. Take your time. Just try 1, then add a 2nd, then add a 3rd, and so forth. You can vibrato upwards, of course. But be careful not to go down and then up. then it starts to feel a bit like you're melting. Let's talk about solos and how to approach them. There are loads of different ways to approach a solo. A lot of them include scales, but I like to include chords in my approach as well. The song Satisfaction is in between E major and E minor, so this is a great place for you to use an E minor pentatonic. I'll walk through the E minor pentatonic now. We start with the open E string, then we go to the 3rd fret, the open A, to the 2nd fret, the open D, to the 2nd fret, the open G, 2nd fret again, open B, 3rd fret, open E, 3rd fret. Now there are some notes in here which we like to target called the root notes. So if I'm on an E chord, I like to target where my E's are. There's an E here, there's an E on the 2nd fret, and then a high E. So if I'm hearing E major, I'll try to land on those notes. And then if we're on an A chord, I want to hear either this A and this A. We have a B7 chord, and we have a B here, and a B here. Of course, the best thing about this is experimenting. Go through it in your own time. Put on a backing track, which we're about to do, and play through the scale. Trust your ears. There's no right or wrong way to play a solo. Just make sure that all your notes are clean and articulated in the way that you want. You don't have to go really fast. In fact, some of the best solos, many of them are spaced out, really beautiful long notes. Now there are different ways to play E, A7 and B7 on the guitar. Another way to play an E chord, the 7th fret of the A string, 6th fret of the D string, 4th fret of the G string, 5th fret of the B string, and the 4th fret of the E string. This is what we call a barre chord, and it's the same with A. I'm playing the 5th fret from the E, 7th from the A, 7th from the D, 6th from the G, 5th from the B, and 5th from the E. I could do the same for B as well by moving that whole shape up 2 frets to the 7th fret. Now once I've got those chords under my fingers, I can start to just target those notes. You could take it slow. Now this might sound like a bit of a cliche, but something you can do when you're playing is get a bit more physical with yourself. So if you're sitting there nice and straight, it can sound a little bit stiff. I like to get really involved with the piece. Loosen up the shoulder. Loosen up the wrist. Of course you're not playing the guitar with your foot or your neck, but these are great indicators that you're physically in time and really feeling the groove. So Don't feel silly by moving around. It's actually a really good sign that you're feeling the music in a really good way. So here's a little example of Satisfaction with a backing track. There's no guitar, but there is vocals. Now when there's vocals, you don't tend to want to solo over the singing. In this case, just to show you an example of soloing, I'm going to be mindful of the vocal and I'm going to try to complement it. Chord tones. This time let's do purely a pentatonic based approach, just using that E minor pattern. Again, I'm going to allow the voice a bit more space and I'm going to try to complement it afterwards. This time, let's do a solo with lots of spaced out notes to really give the singer some space. Example, you may have picked up that I wasn't always playing notes strictly from the pentatonic, and this is what I was talking about when it comes to playing notes of the chord. E, A, B. In music, these are called arpeggios, which are notes of the chord played as single notes. Now there are loads of guitar shapes and pentatonic patterns, 5 pentatonic patterns to be exact, up the neck, which allow you to play higher. For this lesson we've only looked at 1, but when you start to string all the shapes together, you'll start to flow up and down the neck in a really melodic way. Something that's great to do once you have some of your patterns down, major and minor scales, is to actually listen to other instruments. Sax particularly is a really melodic instrument. Because of the nature of their instrument, they have to be very melodic. They use great rhythms and great note choices, and that's always a really cool place to start. Change it up between guitar and then challenge yourself by learning a different instrument on the guitar. Then take those things that you've learned and transfer it over to your songs, and you'll be flying in no time. Let's talk about recording the studio, and some of my experiences. My first experience in the studio was when I was 16, and actually it was singing. It was for an amateur performance of Les Miserables, the theatre production. Shortly after that, I recorded my first EP with my first band, Ivan and the Wolves, which was a lot more hard rock. It was recorded in Milton Keynes and still available on Spotify, and it's called Urban Bonfires for anyone interested. To get to the studio, you have to have people around you. So get out there, meet as many people as you can, and make music. Doesn't matter if it's covers or original stuff. Try to create a network, and that will lead you into places like the studio. My best experience in the studio was recording the last EP for my band Lowly Hounds. We managed to get a female choir in. So I'd arranged the choir. Hearing them lay down all their beautiful harmonies on top of our songs was an absolute pleasure. We recorded that in Sugarcane Studios in Wandsworth, and it's an incredible studio. My worst experience, however, was recording for an American artist who I won't name, and I was told that I'd be laying down some guitar parts for a song they'd written. However, when I arrived, it quickly transpired that they hadn't actually written the song, then proceeded to tell us what they wanted from a song and expected us to write it. At the same time that they were doing this, they were maybe smoking some illegal substances and quickly weren't with us in the world anymore. I ended up the day still as confused as when I'd entered, and really not much had got done. They hadn't arranged a drummer, so I had to call a friend to come in last minute, and the poor guy had no idea what he was playing. All this time, the two people there that booked us were fighting about how the song should be. At one point it was going to be a soft opera piece, and then at another point it was going to be a heavy metal piece. Really no thought had gone into this at all, and I think the moral of that story is you must be prepared when you go to the studio in every way, be it with your sounds, but particularly with your songs. Sounds can be crafted in the studio. It's essential to have all your gear working, your amp, your pedals, have your guitars set up and ready to go. Of course, some guitars will give a different sound, so be sure which sound that you're going for. Some guitars will be brighter, and some guitars will naturally have more of an earthy tone. Perhaps they're what we call a semi-hollow body or a hollow body, and they'll have a more rounder, earthy tone. So be sure of what sound you want to go for, but you must have everything ready to go, and you must be rehearsed. Please don't go to the studio unrehearsed. When you're in the studio, be sure to respect the people that are in charge, and also those that are working really hard. It's a really, really tough job being an audio engineer. It's tiring and you're looking at screens all day, but also you have to pay attention to frequencies and the level of instruments. So these guys are going to be really focused. Don't be too pushy with your ideas. It's all right to suggest a few if you think they're worth it, but don't try to smother yourself all over the track. Yes, it's true that being in a studio is a collaboration, but if a producer or a songwriter has a really clear idea, their word is always at the top. So be aware of that and respect that. If you're interested in recording at home, there's a few things that you're going to definitely need. And one is an interface. This is where you plug your mics in, and you can also plug your guitars in, what we call DI, meaning direct input. So you don't have to go through an amp. However, if you like the sound of your amp, you can also mic up your amp. But this is almost the brain that goes into your computer. So this is an M Audio Air. A really good starting point is Scarlett or Focusrite. I also have a Focusrite 2i4. This has 2 inputs and is really affordable and a great way to start. You're also going to need a DAW or DAW, which means Digital Audio Workstation or Workspace. There's loads of them. I personally use Logic, but there's also Pro Tools, GarageBand, which is a great place to start just to get into recording at home. I believe that it's free with Apple, so that's not going to break the bank. When you're ready, You could upgrade to something more expensive like Logic or Pro Tools or Cubase. Those guys are going to cost you money and they're available in the App Store. So start perhaps with GarageBand. You're also going to need a few mics. This is a Shure SM58 and it's an industry standard. These guys have been around for so long. These guys are reliable, they always sound great, and they're just great go-tos. Of course, you're going to need something to go from your mic to your interface, and the leads that you're going to need are called XLRs. These will allow you to plug your mics into your interface. If you don't want to invest in mics to mic up your amps, there are digital resources for getting good guitar sounds. One that I use is called Guitar Rig, and in the digital software like Guitar Rig, you can drag in digitally molded amps and pedals and shape your sound on the computer, as opposed to having to invest in lots of pedals or an amp itself. Guys, good luck. Thanks for getting involved. Pick up your guitars and have a good play. This was lesson 3 of 3, but there is a Q&A session coming afterwards. Please post as many questions as you want in the comment section, preferably before the Q&A goes live, so I can be ready to answer any questions that you have. But of course, do feel free to ask there and then. I will be able to interact during the Q&A, so if you have any specific guitar questions, feel free to ask. And finally, please get involved on the ICMP blog, and I'll see you very shortly. Good luck.